Conservatism. Conservatives believe in preserving traditional values, institutions, and social order. They often support strong families, organized religion, a powerful military, and private property rights. They see these institutions as the foundation for a stable and prosperous society. Critics argue that conservatism can be resistant to positive change and can perpetuate social inequalities. Liberalism. Liberals emphasize individual rights, democracy, limited government, and equality before the law. They believe that all people deserve certain fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of speech, religion, and assembly. They advocate for free markets and competition, believing it leads to innovation and prosperity. However, some critics argue that liberalism can place too much emphasis on individual freedom at the expense of social justice. Moderatism. Moderates seek compromise and avoid extremes. They believe in finding common ground between opposing viewpoints and implementing practical solutions. They are willing to adjust their stances based on the situation and value pragmatism over ideology. This approach can be seen as lacking strong convictions, but it can also be effective in achieving political consensus. Capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of businesses and the means of production. Goods and services are produced based on supply and demand, with businesses competing for customers in a free market. Proponents argue that capitalism incentivizes innovation, efficiency, and economic growth. However, critics point out that it can lead to wealth inequality and a lack of social safety nets. Socialism. Socialism aims for a more equal society. The government often owns or heavily regulates key industries like healthcare and education to ensure everyone has access to essentials. Socialism emphasizes social justice and collective well-being over individual profit. However, critics argue that it can stifle innovation and economic growth by placing too much control in the hands of the government. Syndicalism. A branch of socialism that believes workers' unions hold the key to achieving a socialist society. Syndicalists focus on worker control of businesses through strikes and direct action. They believe that unions can become the building blocks of a new social order. Critics argue that syndicalism can be disruptive and lead to economic instability. Corporatism. Corporatism advocates for collaboration between businesses, government, and labor unions to manage the economy efficiently. It aims to find common ground for mutual benefit. Corporatists believe that cooperation between these different groups can lead to a more stable and prosperous society. However, critics argue that it can give too much power to large corporations and limit worker rights. Libertarianism. Libertarians value individual liberty above all else. They believe in minimal government, limited regulations, free markets, and individual choice in most aspects of life. They advocate for reduced taxes, less government intervention, and a strong emphasis on personal responsibility. Critics argue that libertarianism can lead to social inequality and a lack of essential public services. Separatism, secessionism. This ideology seeks to establish an independent nation or state by breaking away from an existing one. Separatist movements are often driven by cultural or ethnic differences, a sense of historical injustice, or a desire for greater autonomy. Successful secession can be a complex process, often requiring international recognition and negotiation with the existing state. However, it can also be a path to self-determination and addressing long-standing grievances. Communism. Communism advocates for common ownership of property and resources. In a communist society, the means of production are controlled by the state, and goods and services are distributed based on need rather than profit. Proponents believe that this system leads to a more equal and just society. However, critics argue that it stifles innovation, discourages hard work, and can lead to totalitarian regimes. Feminism. Feminism is a broad movement that seeks political, economic, personal, and social equality between the sexes. Feminists fight against gender stereotypes and discrimination, advocating for equal opportunities for women in education, employment, and political participation. Different branches of feminism focus on various aspects of gender equality, such as reproductive rights, economic empowerment, and ending violence against women. Anarchism. Anarchism rejects centralized government and social hierarchy. Anarchists believe in self-organized communities and voluntary cooperation. They argue that power corrupts, and that a society without rulers can be more just and free. Many forms of anarchism exist, with some advocating for peaceful social change and others for more radical revolution. Critics argue that anarchism is impractical and could lead to chaos and instability. Environmentalism. Environmentalism is a broad ideology that prioritizes environmental protection and sustainability. Environmentalists advocate for policies to address issues like climate change, pollution, and resource depletion. They believe that humans have a responsibility to protect the natural world for future generations. Different environmentalist movements focus on various issues such as renewable energy, conservation of biodiversity, and sustainable development. Populism. Populism is a political approach that appeals directly to the common people. Populists often see themselves as representing the will of the majority and blame elites for societal problems. They often use simple slogans and emotional appeals to connect with voters. Populist movements can be found on both the left and right wings of the political spectrum. Critics argue that populism can be divisive, demonize minorities, and oversimplify complex issues. Republicanism. Republicanism supports a system of government where citizens hold power, typically through elected representatives, rather than a hereditary monarchy. Republican governments can take many forms, such as democracies, republics, and constitutional monarchies. Proponents believe that republicanism ensures that leaders are accountable to the people they represent. Critics argue that some forms of republicanism can be undemocratic and limit participation by certain groups. Progressivism. Progressivism believes that societal progress is more important than preserving tradition. Progressives advocate for social reforms and changes to address modern challenges, such as poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. They often support government intervention to promote social justice and economic opportunity. Critics argue that progressivism can be too focused on government control and can stifle individual liberty. Egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is a school of thought that builds on the concept of social equality, prioritizing it for all people. Egalitarians believe that all citizens of a state should be accorded equal rights and treatment under the law. They advocate for policies that promote equal opportunities in education, healthcare, and economic participation. This ideology can be contrasted with social stratification, where society is divided into distinct classes with unequal access to resources and power. Authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a form of government characterized by a strong central power, which demands obedience and limits political freedoms. Authoritarian regimes often rely on repression and control of information to maintain power. They may offer some degree of stability, but citizens have limited rights to participate in the political process. Fascism. Fascism is an extreme right-wing ideology that emphasizes nationalism, authoritarian rule, militarism, and social hierarchy. Fascist states often promote a strong, unified nation and use violence and oppression to maintain control. They suppress dissent and limit individual liberties. Fascism is often associated with totalitarian regimes that prioritize the state over the individual. For more content like this, please subscribe.